every time I figure that there is some sort of a pattern, I'm trying to think about like, how can I do that more efficiently?
Bernhard, thank you very much for joining us. You're one of the lawyers in Frankfurt I know the longest, I would almost say. So we go back almost a decade, probably. Can you please introduce yourself to the people watching today?
I'm Bernhard Fiedler. I'm a partner at Norton Rose Fulbright. Norton Rose Fulbright is a global law firm. I'm a partner there in the banking department, basically focusing on real estate finance. And when I'm not doing that, I'm sort of focusing on how to innovate for our clients.
Yes, and you do this quite successfully. So,
I wouldn't say so for myself, but thank you.
No, you are, and I can prove it because you were just awarded the Wirtschaftswoche Most Innovative Team, Most Innovative Person.
It was technology. I think the category was technology and data management. And I think the important thing is like that was really a huge success for the whole of our team. It certainly wasn't just me. There is a whole team behind that, consisting of trainees, consisting of lawyers, consisting of technology experts, and all of those actually contributed to a solution that won us that award.
In your speech that you gave after you were awarded this the award from Wirtschaftswoche, you highlighted this, that it was a team effort and that you also have a hybrid team, like different people, not just lawyers, but it is a personal success because you have been pushing for this and you have been doing this for a decade. I mean, if you say that now it's a team effort, but I know that you've been advocating tech solutions in a big law firm for, is it 8 years? You did this, right? You built tech solutions yourself.
Yeah, that is indeed true. I mean, maybe just for way of background, one thing about me personally is that I'm a terribly lazy person, which basically means I hate doing things twice. So every time I figure that there is some sort of a pattern in the work involved I'm doing, I'm trying to think about like, how can I do that more efficiently? And then this is actually where the innovation process starts, and where we start figuring out like, what tools are there to help us to be more efficient? Is it right. Is it document automation? Is it some sort of an expert system? Is it some sort of a collaboration tool? Like when I was a senior associate, I had to draft these 200-page loan agreements, and when late at night you figured out, well, unfortunately it's not just one facility, it's two facilities, and you had to basically make plural into singular on 200 pages. You know, that will be the job for the next hour, and that's not really value. That's not producing real value.
Yeah.
And then the question is like, isn't there a way to do that more efficiently, and maybe just with a mouse click or something like that? And that's really when you start thinking about innovation. You sometimes ask yourself, is that really what I'm being paid for? Is that sort of task I'm currently doing? Is that really what my understanding of a lawyer is?
It's more of a streamlining your work rather than actually. Let's say it's more like that you wanted to change these things. It's not pure necessity because you actually had to tweak the business model. You could have done monkey work.
Yeah, that's sort of true. I mean, my understanding for myself as a lawyer is basically I'm there to advise clients on risks of certain transactions and to make transactions happen. I'm not there for changing plural into singular. That sort of belongs to the game in the sort of sense as we are currently practicing. But if that is something I can get rid of in a way that makes it actually better for the client, because we don't do mistakes in that way, then be my guest.
I remember how you started to work on applications to help you do this and trying out things. And you were also some of the people who actually got really deep into document automation, to expert systems and rule-based applications to help you accelerate things. And then you kind of created that ecosystem and the fertile ground to actually have applications emerging out of this.
We talked about that a couple of years ago when these claimant firms started suing the airlines and producing these the letters for the flight delay claims. That was something where I thought, like, how terribly complex is it actually to build such a system where on the basis of just really minimal information like a flight number and let's say a date, you figure out whether such a passenger claim, well, maybe not 100%, but like, let's say like 80 or 90% might be justified.
Yes.
And the interesting part was really, it basically just took a weekend to create that system, because it's really like when you think about that logic in that sense, it's really just building blocks you're putting together.
Yes.
I mean, that's exactly the business you are in. You're putting together the building blocks, and the biggest, hardest part at that time was actually getting the API connections right.
And you started to build tools in the financial service space. So now, like, share a bit. What is the product you're most proud of, and that you would say your clients need the most and have the most benefit?
The one that is needed the most is actually one we are currently developing. We started that process last year, and it's basically around when you are a large corporate being active in several jurisdictions of the world. One of the obligations you need to be compliant with the respective local laws. The issue you basically have is, in order to be compliant, you need to know what these local laws are, and you need to understand how they change, how the laws change, how the jurisprudence change, whether there are any, let's say, high court judgments that apply to your business, things like that. And what we figured is actually, when we started speaking to clients, what we figured is clients are usually very fond of the law in their home jurisdictions, but the moment they're leaving those home jurisdictions, the legal knowledge suddenly dries out very quickly. There may be legal knowledge in the jurisdictions they practice, but that's usually just like a very small team they have there. You need to have somebody basically for each jurisdiction, more or less constantly monitoring whether there are changes in the law, whether there are changes in envisaged laws, or whether there are changes in the jurisprudence that might affect you in any way, and where you might need to adapt your business. I think that's exactly the part where actually where we as lawyers again think like this is our domain expertise. On the one hand, we figure out what is the change, and then we figure out why is that relevant for the client? Is it relevant at all? Is it something like if you, let's say you have 100 changes a day that are relevant for you? Do you really want to see that 100 changes, or do you want to see that 3 that are imminent business threats? I think that's the part where we are actually creating the value part.
So you're building the layer basically, or the filter, the intelligent filter that sources and sorts and...
It's a combination of both. We are gathering the information on the one side, we are structuring the information. I think that's a very important part, because it's no longer like just by topic and by jurisdictions. Like, it's a really sophisticated data matrix behind that. We're structuring that information on the basis then what we understand our client does. We can tell the client, well, that's interesting for you, or that should be interesting for you, and that isn't.
You're now building something for legal horizon scanning that makes this process faster, easier, more accessible.
I mean, the idea is like you get everything out of one hand, and it puts your mind to ease when it comes to horizon scanning in the sense of compliance monitoring.
Nice. Who's that for? Is that for financial institutions? Is that for any corporate that has transactional activity?
I think in the most holistic level, it's technically every international client with international operations. Obviously, you've got to start somewhere. In our case, we originally started in the insurance world, but from the insurance world, it's like a really short move to the financial services world. And from the financial services world, again, it's not a terribly large move to the corporate world again.
Okay, understood. So you start with the insurance vertical. And how does that look? They subscribe to a service and they decide what they need and what is happening. Then they get a personal digest.
It's the front end and the back end. The back end is holding all the information. Basically, we need to gather. It's how to say. It's a complete information on everything that is relevant and then change it. So that's always there. And then you have the front end, basically, which is customized to that client, and which is exactly that. It's a digest which basically tells you that are the changes. Those are relevant. Why? What you should do, or what your immediate things or the immediate actions are that you could take. So something we basically learned about is like when we are talking about productization in legal services. Usually, you do not start with in the sense that you say like, come on, I have a really good idea for a product. It rather works the other way around, that you say like, I'm doing that all the time, and why I'm not doing that differently, or how could I do that differently? And frankly speaking, legal horizon scanning itself isn't anything new. Other firms have done that. We have done that. We are currently doing that for clients. How it's developing is more like it starts with we are already doing that, and then we are figuring out, well, that information might also be relevant for other clients. And then the next thing is like, could that be standardized? Could that be produced in a more effective way in that sense, so that it also becomes accessible to more clients.
What do you see happening in the market, like at large? Like how easy is that for a law firm to do this? If you have the idea for a new product, you propose this, you maybe even try doing it, you get some positive feedback, and then you bring this idea in house. You tell your co-partnership what is possible and what you plan to do. Then you roll it out. For the first time, you're going from service to products a little bit. You're boxing, you're building standard solutions on pockets of advice that were manual before and very individual. How is that? Like, what's going on? How easy is it to propose that? How easy is it to bring that to the market?
I think the first thing is it's become easier over time, and I touch on that in a second. Just to compare that, the traditional lawyer will likely say to you, like, I have that giant idea for a product, we just need to develop it,
right,
and then we'll show it to the client, and the client will say how great of a product that is.
Of course.
And that will exactly never happen.
Yes.
It won't happen for the massive investment money at the front, and it will certainly not happen for the development, and it won't seriously not happen for the client saying, that's exactly what I want. We actually try to think a bit like a startup company there. So the idea is like somebody has an idea, and let's say last summer actually I heard a presentation from a colleague of mine. She was speaking about legal horizon scanning. I thought that sounds pretty interesting, because I could see like how you gather information on the one side, how that might be relevant for other clients, how the database behind that might look like, how a selling model could look like. So there was some spark of interest.
Yeah.
Out of that, we sort of start traditional startup process. The first thing we do is we take a lean canvas. So for those of you who don't know what a lean canvas is, it's basically a structured document that puts you through a structured thinking approach when you're considering a business model.
Yeah, it's a business plan. Business plan for dummies of.
Exactly, the right thing for lawyers.
Perfect.
So we start exactly with that, and the good thing about that lean canvas is actually it really takes you to the big points. What we then start is actually we start speaking to clients and ask them, we think that's an issue. Do you think that's an issue? We learned everything we learned the hard way. Of course, we tried, like we developed something and then figured out that nobody wants to have that. We all did that.
Yeah.
It's really just that after a certain period of time, we learned, well, let's do things differently, and maybe let's start with the client, or at least bring in the client quite early, so that we don't lose our main focus. Then we slowly move to development. It starts with wireframes. So basically, like really just SketchUps, how it could look like. The next step is then really like you're really considering, how would I develop that? Is that something, for example, where I need a lot of tech development? In our case, it's not really that.
Right.
Then, or the question is like, well, at some point we need to get the input from somewhere. How do we structure that? And then you start thinking about like, how do I structure that?
Right.
Can I structure that with one client? Do I need two clients? Those are the thoughts that go. Next step after that, then it's basically once you figure out like how you can start with that, then you really start actually. That's sort of the process.
How does that look like on a team size? Is there some legal engineer involved already? Is there somebody from the knowledge management team involved? How does the team look so far at that stage?
We currently have the fantastic opportunity actually that we have product managers. Like we started out really small, just 2 or 3 people. But like once you've done the canvas and you figure out there might be interest in that, and you have the first client interviews, what we can do is basically you get assigned a product manager, and then you have like a really dedicated person that is pushing through that process. And then the team varies. It depends on like there are stages where you have legal designers on board, and there are stages where it's more the products team where you're thinking about like how do I monetize that. It really depends on the stages.
And then next step, then you have your first MVP. You have something in hand that you can show, that you can demo, and you then invite people for lunch and unveil the idea, or do you go PowerPoint first and you basically first pitch it and test it?
The true answer is again it depends. if you've done the process as I've just described, you already have active leads, because you've already started talking to clients and you already figured out who's interested in that and who's not. So you starting the sales pipeline in that sense is at least not, you're not starting at zero in that sense. You really have to be active in your sales approach, and you really have to be consistent, persistent. So you constantly need to follow up with people, because like when you're talking when you're talking about product sales and legal, I think the sales pipeline is easily a year long or even longer. Yeah. And what we also had to learn sort of the hard way is our traditional contacts, our traditional business contacts we have in the transaction world, but also like in the normal advice world, may not necessarily be the persons at the client who make the decision, right? And who are actually the people in need. So that may be completely different people, and that's a challenge in its own to figure out who are actually the right people to speak to.
The challenge here is a mindset thing, I think, because as you point out, it's actually not so much about the product. I mean, the product is important, and ultimately that's the thing you're selling. But you have a lot of effort going into the right approach, the right packaging, pricing, go-to-market. You're a partner with NRF and have a business model in place that is not even predominantly based on products, right? You're still a traditional banking lawyer. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's perfectly right.
How would you say is the world changing in big law, in going towards business models that are increasingly product based?
The sort of frustrating part was actually like, after having built a couple of applications, I thought like, yeah, I've done that. That wasn't terribly complicated. What's next?
Yeah.
And actually, what I sort of experienced at the time was like, it seemed like it's not. Well, there probably is an unlimited number of use cases you can make, but like when I was thinking at the time, like I thought, yeah, I did the three obvious one, but now we need to start looking for the not so obvious ones. When I look back 10 years ago, innovation wasn't that much of an issue. We now have innovation teams, we now have product teams, we now have legal designers, we have design thinking experts. Like that is something like the infrastructure has really grown over time, and I think. When now looking forward, I think it's becoming much easier because you have all that infrastructure and all of that support, so that you don't need to do everything yourself.
You're looking for team members as well. So is your team growing, which is good? Is your team expanding in any way?
Well, we have expanded slightly at the beginning of the year when we hired a team member specifically for document automation. That sort of. You mentioned that I'm a traditional lawyer, still in the sense what I'm doing. Drafting is a lot of what we're doing, so technically document automation is important for me. We've hired somebody for that. We are now also looking on the product side. We have a few products, we have some in the pipeline. And as I mentioned, the challenge is really like, how do you sell those? And that is something where we now start actively looking for, like, how could we think about creating some new or try out some new sales approach?
Bernhard, thank you very much for joining us for the interview and for coming over. It's a pleasure as always. So it's really interesting where things actually are at the moment, and super curious to see where they are in the next 10 years. So nice spotlight on what you're doing, and again, congrats on what you've achieved within the firm and how visible that is in the DACH region. So congrats and all the best, I'd say. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.